Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's a harsh day outside, cold, windy, nasty, all of that, so I really appreciate you coming along and hearing what we've got to say. Money Gani TPG. I'm a producer and a cultural organizer from Manchester. I've been there for a long time. And we're here to talk to two of the artists that are part of the Lightwaves Festival 2024. And as some of you all know, Lightwaves is an annual festival of light, and it comes into sort of Quays, and people get to come out and engage in some art and some tech and some things that might not ordinarily be free and available to the public. So very important that it's free, and we get to share some amazing art and culture with the city of Salford. So I would like to introduce to my left Lazerian, and to my right Gaika, and I'm going to let them just introduce themselves really quickly and tell us in sort of some simple terms who you are, where you're from, and what you do. Start with you, Lazerian.
Nice one, Danny. So I'm Lian Hopkins, also known as Lazerian. I've been under the name Lazerian now for nearly 19 years. So I set the studio up straight out of university. I went to Manchester School of Art studying 3D design. And I've always loved physical structures, materials, processes, and things that kind of drive people to kind of question the kind of why is it like that, what is the kind of deeper meaning and narrative behind it, and also having fun. I've always kind of loved just pissing about with materials, basically, to kind of see what it can do and push boundaries and see what comes out of it. And over all them years, kind of built up a little library of knowledge and understanding of how mistakes kind of then turn into things to progress other projects down the line. And so I'm an artist slash designer, engineer, sculptor. I cross a lot of boundaries, and it annoys me when people try to kind of pigeonhole me into a kind of certain, way. I'm just kind of happy to just kind of explore and do what I want to do and just see where that goes. That's in a nutshell, that's me.
My name's Gaika, and I'm from London, but I lived here for about 13 years. I first came here, I went to UMIST to study aerospace engineering. I quickly realised that I didn't want to design missiles in a war, so I dropped out and I became a club promoter for a long time. I don't know, some people here might know from them times, but from that I fell into music, and I ended up becoming a musician and a filmmaker. But I also kind of went back to school and studied design at Salford. And I guess at some point, all of these quite disparate strands of my life started to converge in this kind of multidisciplinary practice, which is a mixture of music, film, video, writing, and structural architecture. I never thought I would use any of the things I learned in engineering school, but apparently I cannot escape them. And so, my work, what I tend to do is I'll make what I call a mystery object that it becomes a meeting place or a place for people to interact with themselves, with the piece, with each other. And often it will play music or it will play sound, and sometimes I'll release that music. And different people know me in different ways, but the core of it is always making that sort of mystery object. And that's what's brought me here.
And I think for you, Gaika, the work that you've made for Lightwaves is quite different, or no, actually it's not quite different. You've presented the sort of work that Gaika would always kind of present, which inquires and it's challenging, but this is making quite a different scenario for you, like in terms of it being not just in collaboration with lots of different artists, but being in such an accessible space, both conceptually and physically. Like, could you tell us a bit about what that's been like for you?
Yeah, a lot of my work has been inside of museums or in private galleries, and I've struggled with that somewhat. So to finally be able to make something outside that everybody can see without having to pay a lot of money to do so, it's been amazing. Connecting with things that it's not just pure abstraction, which a lot of my work I think in the past has been, like it's quite minimal abstract stuff. But actually trying to respond to a brief and speak a bit more directly has also been amazing. I think I've got so much from doing that, and also from like physically making something that is identifiable without having to explain it. That's always been what I try to do in music. You know, like make something that's identifiable as mine. I always say, what flavor is Coca-Cola? I try and do that in all my work, like make something that is identifiable as being mine. But I think what happens with that sometimes is there's a real specific context then. So people that know, they know what it's about, they get it immediately. And then other people who don't know that thing and don't know the story and don't know where I'm coming from, it looks cool, it looks well made, it's interesting, it's provocative, but they're just unsure about what it is. I think with this, it's a little different in that trying to communicate, you know, something that wasn't just about me or my life, and I really enjoyed that.
And what about yourself, Lazerian? I know that I've seen lots of your work in so many different scenarios. I've seen that your work on the road, on four wheels, moving at speed. I've seen it coming out of presses and, you know, all sorts of different scenarios for your work. How is this different, if not in the making, in presentation?
What I always love is that every project that I do is totally different. And I love kind of letting people kind of question what my practice is about as well. And for creating a piece for Lightwaves light's always intrigued me because it brings the night to life, and getting people out and about and getting them to question a piece of work where they wouldn't necessarily see in the street, or literally here at Salford Quays is, you know, it's a piece that anybody can take in, but there is a lot of meaning there. And in all my work, I have a lot of narrative in the piece that it says a lot, and it, you know, it's left a lot to the user to kind of let them decide what it's about. But the beauty of the piece that I've created here, when I put it towards the guys at Quays Culture, it was quite a loose idea that I wanted to create this sense of freezing kind of gravity in time, and creating, I've always loved line drawings and I've always loved skeletal structures. Like, I think there's something so beautiful about stripping a form right back to its basic form, and then having so much negative space around it to let it breathe and let it talk and do its own thing. And having these kind of series of like neon lights that are literally line drawings in space that move around at such a slow. And that was one of the things that I wanted to do. I wanted to kind of stop people, and it's been quite nice actually, like sitting and standing by it and hearing people just like what they think about it, and they think that it doesn't move. and that was the whole point, is that it is moving. It's like a living thing. But like,
tell us, start at the beginning and tell us what it's called, what the concept is,
yeah.
how it works.
So the piece is called Stellar Waves, and it's based around a few things that I like and appreciate. One, like I just said, is the line drawings, but also kind of like space-time, the kind of beautiful kind of gravitational pull, the water droplets, you know, when you drop a stone into the water and you get this beautiful pull, and all this kind of happens so instant, and it's kind of like, how can I capture like a second over several minutes? So the piece takes 7 minutes to kind of go down and back up, where you get this kind of beautiful form happening, and that is all weighted from 4 rocks from the earth. So with the 4 rocks are suspended, and they hold the neon lights up. So if you take the rocks away, the whole thing would drop. So you got this kind of beautiful synergy of these two energies, and the kind of juxtaposition of this light and this mass, and the two work together to create this kind of beautiful line drawing that's floating in the air. So that's what I wanted to kind of capture, and having them beautiful kind of forms of a stone against the crispness of a neon light is something beautiful in itself as well. And so it's a space for people to actually sit and contemplate life, because we all expect something to happen so instant, you know. It's just like life kind of on phones and things and scrolling through, and if something's not happening within a few seconds, it's gone. And people need to then, for me, just actually taking life a little slower. And that's what I wanted to do in the piece with Stellar Waves. So hopefully, you know, it does that and it comes across that way.
And as you saw back, can you tell us about your piece of work, what it's called, and how it came together?
Yeah, it's called System Lightwaves PSP. It's kind of an iteration of a work that began many years, 6 years ago, called System, which is, I guess, was based around sound system culture and building a structure which emits sound and bring people towards it, and also talks about an issue or investigates architecture and urban environment. In this case, we were kind of investigating the politics around cycling. I grew up, my father was an avid cyclist. I am a cyclist. And I think what I wanted to make was something that kind of spoke to the reality of who uses the road the most, which at the moment on two wheels are the platform riders, the people who deliver your food, the people who deliver blood and stuff like that. I think it started in the pandemic when this thing became kind of ubiquitous, and I noticed there was suddenly lost like teams of men, you know, keeping us all alive, and then we can even see them, and that's only grown, and it's become something that I find can't ignore. It's fascinating. We had the amazing opportunity to work with Belinda Everett, who was in the audience. He was a sound commander for Manchester, and had some in-depth conversations. And it's her voice that you can hear on the piece. I think visually, I view it almost like it's like a photograph of the city kind of jumbled up and put into 3D. So I view it as like a road with cyclists at the lights, and all of the chaos and violence and competition and all the things that means. When, you know, I don't know if you've ever noticed, I live in London, right? And when you get to a red light and there's just loads of people like vying to get off the mark as if they're on the trap. I just find that kind of a really fascinating moment. I try to create a snapshot of that, but box it in, because it's kind of shrouded in this shell of capitalism. And so a lot of my work is like using the equipment or the materials of industry to kind of critique said industry. And so that's what that work is. And then the lights, to me, they're sort of computer controlled lights which feel like cities, technology, all of the kind of ordered reality that we make with machines, and those two things crashing into each other, I think is at the core of how I feel about the subject matter. And so, yeah, I hope that it sparked interest of maybe thinking about something as simple as ordering your food and sort of expecting it to be there instantly. Like, this wasn't a thing that we used to do. We didn't think, I'm going to get a takeaway and it will be here in 5 minutes. But somehow now we just, I don't know, I speak to myself, I find myself getting impatient looking at the map. And that's a new emotion, that's a new thing that just didn't happen, but is now sort of created by an overarch of technology. And I think a lot of the time I'm trying to think about that in my works, like how does technology truly impact our world in ways that, and our behavior in ways that we don't really necessarily understand as being direct.
And so, you know, you said that the thoughts around that started 6 years ago, but actually from, you know, the point of the commission actually happening and creating the work, like how long did that take, Mac? You know, you started the work this year at some point, and you know it was complete to this particular deadline. Like, how long did it take, and what was the actual process of physically making the work?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how long. I can't. In terms of like physically making it, I've been doing it by hand myself for the last 2 weeks outside. There's that. But did we design it? Well, I designed it in 3D, and then ordered the parts, and then sort of put it together, prototypes, set of things in London, came up, and then sort of put it together in Manchester, and then transported it, broke it down, and then transported it to the side. I put it back together again, and that's been something that we did for a couple of weeks. I think if we go back to design, I'd say that was maybe 3-4 months ago. And then, as I said, when I go back to 6 years ago, I think that's more just the progeny of the idea of this industrial system. And I've done various works like in that vein. But in terms of this, it's been the initial idea happened in the pandemic, and then what it evolved into to the started a year ago.
And so, Liam, you know, like from concept to like physical manifest, how long did it take to do this, or what was that process like? You know, I'd like, tell us a bit about that. You know, I want to know what you're doing in the workshop and what sort of machinery you're using and how much of it's done by hand and all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
So I put the idea forward, I think it was late August, wasn't it? So, like 3 months. And I've been on it since then, but I always have several projects on the go at once. Where kind of, when I stumble across an absolute headache, I usually put that down and then pick up on other projects, or start working on another idea, which then gives me time to then work out the problem that I've come across there. And then that usually sorts itself out. So that was like the first several weeks of actually understanding. Just made some small models of basically a set of rings, just literally tabletop size, and then just used cotton, and then the weights are used like little nuts and bolts instead of stones, and literally as raw as you can get. And I usually kind of start every project like that is so raw. I don't get bogged down by like the details, because all them kind of they're the later stage for me. I kind of need to understand the main structure of how it's going to physically work, and then work from that. So that was probably 2 weeks of playing around with tabletop models and understanding that. And then once I understood that, I actually could get these things to work with a weight to keep them up. Was then, fucking hell, now I need to bring light into it. And I know that I wanted to go quite as big a scale as I could. So then I kind of worked back from the transport that I've got, which then dictated the scale. I've been doing it now professionally for like nearly 19 years, and I've come to realise that working with other transport companies is a headache. So I try and kind of take control of that, where I know that I can move things around and things. So things get designed around how I can move them about. So as I progressed in my career, things have naturally got bigger because I've got things to move them about. So, and it's nice kind of like when I look back at how things evolved. A lot of my early work, I wanted to make bigger things, but I didn't have the capability to move things around. And the machinery and things that I had was quite small. So then I kind of realised that I could make things modular and bring them together. And that kind of dictated a lot around my practice. And I kind of love that idea of kind of exploding something into multiple parts. And I always used to love like Meccano and Lego as a kid, and bringing stuff together. And I think that that's always come across in the kind of work, is that there's multiple things that come together to create the final piece. So I've just gone to have a little tangent there, but that's what's dictated the size of the neons. So I ended up going with 4 meter diameter neon, because that's the size that I could get. I knew that I could make a framework to fit on the trailer that I've got to bring it over. And that was probably the worst thing I could have done, because kind of making a 4 meter almost perfect circle out of neon or even LED and neon is a challenge. And I've learned a lot through that. I don't regret it at all, because I've kind of developed some new skills of how to kind of form things, because you can get, what's beautiful about light technology over the last few years is that it's changed massively. So you can create a sense that it does look literally like neon, but through LED. And because I never won about trying to do something that looks fake. I've always been true to a kind of form or a material. So I ended up having to make a lot of formers to then form tube to put LED in to make it look like neon, and actually create these perfect circular rings. So that was a few weeks literally sucked right out of me, because I was developing a way how I can form LED neon into tubes. And then once I created them, it was then working everything out from the scale, the scale model, tabletop model, to then these like 4 meter concentric rings coming down to like 600 diameter. Was then a super challenge, because I spent these last few weeks making these things that then there's a case that it might go wrong, and then you've got to then recreate it all again. So there is that kind of always little sense of worry that it could go wrong at any point. But them kind of risks are always what excites me as a creative as well. I think if you're not kind of feeling a bit of a risk, then you're not pushing yourself to create new stuff. And then a lot of the things as well, like the mechanics and the structure, have actually come from other projects as well. So like the kind of worm screw and the motors is just what was hanging around the workshop. The actual like the box section and the frames at the bottom was an old mezzanine out of a bar in Manchester. So like literally a lot of my work is always been a big sustainability side of it. And from day one, and for years, I never shouted about that. I just think that is something that should be done anyway. Is kind of use as much as what's around you as you can. And even if it's not around you, there's enough resources to go and get things that's already out of life. So there is that as well, which is driven some of the kind of design aspects behind the piece. You know what I mean? I think if I didn't have them pieces to hand, then the form would probably be totally different. And again, that's something that's always excited me, is that it's the design is driven a lot through process and through play. You know, there's a large element of 3D digital design, but there's as much, and if not more, of hands-on modelling and playing around with material, you know. So yeah, I hope that answers.
That's one. And saw quite a bit about challenges there, and I think for all artists, there's always an element of problem solving when that's about like space, resources, access to equipment, size of the space that you work with, all of those kind of things. And I want to hear about some of the challenges that you met in making this piece of work.
Yeah, I think I've been really spoiled in terms of how I've started making this work, how many years ago. So for the most part, I've been inside nice places or warm places. This is the first outside work I've done, and it's a different thing, when you're in Manchester in December and you're not used to it. So yeah, that was a major challenge, I think, in terms of not being in the city in which my studio is, where my team are, and on top of that being outside, and it being inclement weather, was challenging. But I think, funnily enough, the cold didn't really get me. It was more the logistical thing of moving a 5 meter by 5 meter structure that's also kind of intricate, in pieces from London to here, doing the work that needs to be done, and then moving it from one position here to another. It's just hugely time consuming when you don't have a massive amount of people. And I'd say the biggest challenge was kind of underestimating how much time that would take, or how much I've been used to when I've got my own team who are very they know how to work with the materials, and because a lot of the stuff that I work with is it locks together like Lego, so I just assume that everybody else knows how to use that. But I forget that it's also 3 meters wide, and it's cold, and it's fiddly if you don't know how to do it. And so all of that stuff, becomes challenging when it's all new. But I've got so used to this, we go in, bam, 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 we do it like that. I tend not to I model it in 3D, and I think I'm quite lucky in that. Generally in my head, what I can see translates into the real world. So I tend to sort of, I've just got my 3D model, I've got a CAD drawing, and I put it up, and it works as I intended it to. But I think that in itself can be a little bit, it can cause problems, because if you are suddenly hit with something that you didn't anticipate, it's difficult. So yeah, one thing I'm going to learn is to build in a bit more time for that play, like you said, to kind of be working things out once it's up, and testing things and stuff like that. I think I really like doing outside work. I just got to make sure that I just give myself a bit more time.
And you both speak as much in engineering terms and industrial terms as in artistic terms, right? So is there ever a time where you feel like that's maybe I don't know, like a challenge in terms of how much you're seen as an artist? Like, is there ever a time where you feel more like an engineer than an artist? Like, does that get in the way of the artistry, or is it just all heart and muscle of the like problem-solving element of being an artist?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it kind of goes, it's always gone hand in hand. And I think more so because I love the making, and the physical making of things for me is as important as the actual creating and coming up with the idea. And because of that, like Gaika was saying, is that I've got that same thing, is that if I can see it in my mind, I know I can bring it to life. I know that if I can see it there, I can make it appear there at some point, you know? And the early days when I didn't have the facilities that I've got now to hand, it was a fucking nightmare, because it's kind of like you go to a production company and you kind of go, I want it less, and they go, I can't do it like that. Like, why can't you do it like that? And it's kind of like you just stumble across these people that don't want to do stuff that's out of their ordinary thing. So I've, over the years, developed my own way of making, and you kind of, I speak to people that have got similar machines or similar production facilities, and they're kind of like, why are you doing it like that? It's like, it might not be the right way, but it's the right way for me. And that's how I've developed my practice. And I'm not asked if someone who's been doing it for 50 years, been doing that way, they're not happy with it. It's kind of like, if it works for you as an artist, then that's fine. You know, and that's what's been heavily important for me, is to be able to have my own kind of engineering way of how to create things, so I can bring the ideas to life. Because if it's now at a point where if I give it to someone else to create, I know that it wouldn't end up being what I want. Yeah.
So like, as artists who engineer their art, right? But you've become like highly skilled in engineering aspects.
Yeah.
If somebody comes along and says, listen, I've got such a project, maybe it's not artistic, maybe it is, but will you outsource your engineering skills to me? Is that something that you're up for, or is it like, no, I'm an artist, like, I wouldn't bring my engineering skills to something that's not artistic?
I'll answer the first question first. For me, it's the other way around. I think I studied engineering, and you know, I come from a family of scientists and architects, and I'm largely considered an artist. You know, my physical artworks have been exhibited in the British Art Show. I've exhibited at the Pace Gallery, Tate Gallery, and ICA, all those sort of places. But I struggle with what it means to be a contemporary artist. Like, banana stuck to a wall is a load of trash to me. So that's just what I think. And so I would rather be considered an engineer. So when that question comes up, oh, you know, are you an artist? Are you a rapper? Are you all this? I'm like, I just make things. And whether that plays with people's expectations from someone who looks like me, that's their problem. So I don't really think about it like that. I think, would I outsource that work? Yeah. Because I think Britain doesn't look as good as it could. I think a lot of things that are not made properly, and I think there's no reason if you go to Germany or Japan or some places like that where there is respect and support for artists and artisans and engineers, and the belief that engineers, you know, have artistic integrity, rather than it just be like, how do we make this for as little money as possible? You get better things, better buildings. So I would love to do that, to be honest.
And how does, like, you know, all of this stuff that we're talking about, like, level out commercially, right? Because, like, for me, being involved in Lightwaves, the first time in ages that I've been a part of something that's, like, actually art first. It's actually art and community first versus lots of commercial work. You know, we're having a conversation the other day about how so much art, music, culture, subculture is, like, all up for sale. Everything feels like advertising or marketing of a minute. Like, how do you both kind of level with that? And that's, you know, assuming that, you know, you both have created commercial work, you know, or brand associated work. Like, how do you balance that? Or do you even care about balancing?
I mean, collaborations with large commercial and organisations and things are, for me, quite important. Some artists really don't like doing it because they kind of feel as though it's going against the values and, like, this trajectory where they should be going. But then they're struggling, they don't have any money. So I've always seen it as that they're hugely important, because if you then collaborate, and as I've always tried to, when I have collaborated with organisations and brands and things, is that to not lose your voice. So I always have some form of creative control, because otherwise I just become a production house, and I don't want to just be a production house. It's kind of like I still want to get across what I want to do, and if I don't get that through a collaboration, it's not for me. And I've built up a kind of name over the years of I've always had that sustainability factor since day one, and there's a lot of brands that try and want to do stuff for the sake of greenwashing. So if it doesn't feel right, I won't do it. So it's not always about the money either. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, even though there is, you know, potential to get a good amount of money for a project, if it doesn't feel right, I don't do it. And to go back to your other question about would it kind of work with other people to produce stuff on the engineering side of it, I have done in the past. And what excites me about them collaborations and things with other manufacturers is for an artist to be able to step into that space and look at the facilities that they've got and what their product is, and how you can basically change a few little things to create something totally unique. And that's always been, you know, one of the things for me, that if I'm going to, you know, do a partnership or collaboration with a manufacturer, then again, it's about having that creative control. Yeah.
Thank you. And how does that all balance out to you later?
Yeah, it's interesting. The only sort of brand work that I do is not related to my visual practice, and it's music composition for brands I've done. And I'm often going into that situation with the benefit of people being fans of my records that I've released or remixes that I've done. So they kind of They kind of just want me to do what I do. However, I am notoriously averse to doing what it is that they want me to do if I think it's rubbish. And I will tell them. Because I just think, at the end of the day, sort of creative decisions that are made by committees of people who are really afraid of studying the thing that they're supposed to know about, leads to bad things. And then everybody going, how did that happen? So you just got to fight in that moment for your voice to be heard, but back it up. So I would always have said, well, okay, this isn't about taste. This is, can you explain to me why it is you think this thing should be shorter or be longer or have this or have that, in terms of, like, where have you got this information? That's not going to make people watch it more or share it more. That's kind of a fallacy that people have in marketing, I think. So I think then when you get a reputation for being like that, people come to you because they want that thing. When it comes to my visual work, I've just been really blessed in that any commercial work that I've done has been like open brief. Like I did a motorcycle for a movie. So it was a dream commission. I haven't done anything where I've had any difficulties with dealing with that stuff, but maybe that makes me view it through kind of rose-tinted spectacles. But, you know, I spent years working as a graphic designer here in Manchester. So I kind of, when I became an artist, I'd already done almost a decade of client work. And for me, it was, I got to the point where I really wanted to just do what was in my head. And so I started to, and I didn't expect it to lead to any of that, but it did. So that's the way I am the way I am.
Do you think that applying any of this kind of like commercial thinking and method to a festival like Lightwaves would impact it positively or negatively, actually? You know, kind of added a commercial aspect to something that is free, that is accessible, that is family friendly. Like, what are the impacts that you think would be created, and are they pros or are they cons?
What do you mean in terms of kind of partnerships with potential? I think if it's the right one that kind of solidifies what Lightwaves and Quays culture is about, and if it allows artists to create work like what's about, then I'm all for it. If then kind of commercial opportunities come and then they want to then put their brand all over it, then it's not particularly, it gets kind of lost, because then it goes back to that kind of committee things sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes from my experience, is that then it comes to, if someone's funding something, then they want to have a say as to what it is. And if that starts happening, then it kind of loses the sense of what a festival is. And I think what Quays Culture do here is amazing, because they allow artists to create work that they want to create. They bring work in from across the world that they've seen and giving other artists opportunities to come to a different city. And yeah, like you say, for me, if it's the right partner, then I'm all for it. If it's to then put Coca-Cola all over it, then no, you know?
Okay, so thank you. So one more. Oh, well,
Yeah. I mean, I think actually that public festivals, there's no place for commercial engagement in, because I feel like we need to keep up the pressure on governments to fund public arts I think that, two examples, I once witnessed an argument at the Large Hadron Collider between one scientist who was saying that he was glad that lost billions of dollars every year in the pursuit of the truth of the universe, and he wished that would happen the whole time. And another guy who said this thing is a massive white elephant and doesn't mean anything to anybody. And I think about that argument a lot, because I don't know how, when you are pursuing something which is so abstract, you can actively choose to put in the consideration to make money. And so for me, like festivals, big cultural festivals that are, you know, based around the city, yeah, they are vanity projects, and they should be a demonstration of the ability, the belief, the spirit of the people in that city. And I think we should push for that interest to be, you know, we should fight for that interest to be the main interest. Otherwise it inevitably becomes a 30-foot McDonald's sign in the air. You know what I mean? Or like you go to Venice and there's just like Rolex everywhere. I don't see how that doesn't go that way.
I think that feels like, well, I'm going to ask one more question, but it feels like a good place for me to end and open up for questions from you guys. So I think if anybody has any questions, now's the time. It'd be really good to hear from you. And I will start picking people out as well. So I'll give you a minute to compose yourself, and then I'll start picking people out if no hands are raised in 5, 4, 3, 2, mustache.
I must speak?
Yes.
Actually, I came here, really, I didn't know what to expect, and my hopes weren't high, but I'm completely surprised. I very enjoyed what you said, and the weird thing is, the whole time I thought about Collider, and now you spoke about it. Very good.
Lovely. So, do you have a question at all for either of our artists? A beautiful statement. Thank you. Cool. Hi.
Is there a significance with the 7 minutes that it takes just to...
I'd love to say yes, but no. It was basically 7 minutes, because it was either 7 minutes or 12 minutes, because they were the belts and the motors that I've got in work. And 12 minutes is too long. 7 minutes is long enough to, and the speed that it is, a lot of my work about it is about creating 3D and 2D. So what's beautiful about like the kind of wireframe and like the light here is, when you look at it, it's literally going back to 2D. And then when it's viewed through a phone, it's then literally like a drawing within the space. And even when I've created work that's 2D, is that it comes back from a 3D thing. So I'll make a sculpture that creates 2D work, you know, like a 2D painting or a drawing. So to go back to your thing, there's 7 minutes. No, I'd be chatting shit if I did.
Anybody else? Yes.
I'm finding it kind of interesting that like both of you spoke a bit about like in yours there was a freezing of time a little bit, or wanting to slow down time, and then also in Gaika's like rebelling against the instant like delivery stuff and stuff like that. And like I made work here as well, and so I'm thinking about how like in mine I'm taking people's heartbeats and I'm trying to like almost like save that moment for life rather than to celebrate stuff in depth and stuff like that. I'm wondering if that's developed in your practice recently, of a thing of trying to hold on to time a little bit as it sort of slips away, or where's that come from?
Maybe it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
That's all I say about that. I feel like I look at your work, I look at my work, I look at your work. I think it's the same thing, which is just trying to store some moment because we're all nervous that it might be the end. No one wants to say it, but like that's how I feel anyway.
A bit heavy for a Saturday afternoon, you know what I mean?
Any more questions?
You can't hide. Yeah.
Yes. You have a question. I know you do. Yes.
Interested in, you talked a bit about your visual artwork and music, and you talked about them separately. How do those sort of disciplines work together? And is there any point in creating this piece, which I haven't seen, by the way, I was looking to tomorrow. Is there any elements to the work that you sort of bring into?
Yeah, I mean, it's like in my head, it all works in the same way. It's like about just like layers of things and how they interact with each other. And so, from a design perspective, I find that a lot of super fans of my music are architecture students. It's just this like recurring thing because it's like they understand how it all hangs together, and so the process is remarkably similar in terms of I can't really put it into words, but they are linked, and the pieces always play music. They're designed as giant structures to play sound, and they become more elaborate or more intricate than just being a speaker rig. And all of my kind of visual sort of drawing and painting and 3D is now kind of crept into that work, which started as staging for shows, and it all happened. I would make more elaborate stages for my shows, or we would have cameras and things on stage, and then I was like, well, let's just make it look good. And then it was, okay, now I'm designing these things for this, and then someone said, hey, I've heard you're the guy to come and do an installation about this. I was like, okay, well, I don't know what that means, but let me go and do it. I'm just going to build a more elaborate version of something that I had already been doing. I think a lot of my installation work or three-dimensional work it's designed with function in mind, and that function might be, I need you to hear what this is about, or I need you to see this sculpture, or it's all of those things together. And then it somehow maybe it all comes from putting on clubs in Manchester years ago, where it was like, I'm going to create this space and I'm going to invite everybody into it. And when I really dig out why I did that, and the moments from it that I remember would always be these moments of peace when everything had worked. But that interested in being like the guy. I didn't do it for social climbing. I just liked to see everybody having a good time. And so I guess all of those things, I think that's the guiding principle. So then it kind of links all of the different things. People are listening to my records, or they're watching something that I've made, or if I think about making a film, right, I'll start thinking about what about the cinema, what are you going to eat? And I'll start creating all of those things. So I don't know, maybe I should have been an architect, but...
I think one more.
Yes. Yeah. You have a question? No. Okay. Okay, well, unless there's like one more burning, even inappropriate question that anybody wants to ask, it's probably time for us to draw a line under it. But thank you very much for coming out and breathing the elements and spending some time with us. And where will people be able to watch and share this discussion once it goes out online?
If you keep an eye out on Quays Culture socials, we'll let you know where it's going to go.
So if you keep an eye on Quays Culture socials on Instagram. And are you on Blue Sky? Are you still on Twitter? You're on Blue Sky. Keys Culture on Blue Sky. We're no longer on X. And have a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.